Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
He'd never been in any car really driving, let alone this car. So when we first just put him in the car and said, okay, and rev this thing up, 850 horsepower, with a safety driver, of course, that's a little intimidating to anybody. And then, of course, he's going to do this hands-free, feet-free, and the accelerator, the throttle, entirely with his mind.
This is Common Denominator, straight-up conversations with Moshe Popak. Relying on critical thinking and open-spirited debate, we invite you to find common ground on everyday issues and encourage you to be bold, to be optimistic, and to take action. To learn more, head to MoshePopak.com, and we'd be so grateful if you'd like, share, and subscribe to the show. Now, here's your host, Moshe Popak.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. Today, the incredible technology that enabled a quadriplegic man to drive a race car with his brain. But first, I'm really excited to share that we'll be giving away another Common Denominator gift basket to a lucky listener that includes merch, mugs, and much more. Later in this episode, I'll share a password. To be entered to win, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at mpopak and DM me that password on any of the platforms. Now, on with the show. In 2013, German Aldana suffered a C4 spinal cord injury as a passenger in a car accident. He never imagined he would have a chance to drive. But last month, he drove a NASCAR Cup car with his mind. This is due in large part to the extraordinary work of the Falchi Adaptive Motorsports Initiative and the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis. We're honored to have German and neurosurgeon Dr. Scott Falchi, the founder of the Falchi Initiative, on the show. Gentlemen, welcome to Common Denominator.
Great to be here.
Happy to be here too. Thank you.
German, let's start with you. I just want to go through the thought process from a point of from your original injury, thinking that you'll never be able to drive again, and the emotion that was going through your mind when you were able to do, drive a car with your mind. What was that feeling like?
It was amazing. It felt like a form of freedom. You felt at the beginning, they told me about it, and it was hard to imagine it. I thought about it, how it's gonna be, but once being there, it was totally different. Like at first, I was nervous, a little bit afraid because I never really drove in a car, and also, especially with my disability, you're kind of scared of stuff like this because this hasn't been done before, so I was the first one to give it a try. But once I was on the car and I did like one lap and I saw how it was me controlling it, not somebody driving for me, I felt free. The adrenaline rush, it felt like just unreal. It was something that it's hard to explain. You gotta live it.
It must have been more emotional for you, probably because the accident had occurred in a car, and here you are, you're going back. I always say that about different traumas that happen in people's lives. You got to go back to the place where the trauma happened, and I love the way you're expressing yourself. Like, it probably was extra emotional for you.
Yeah, it was. My accident was a car accident, but I always try to I don't let that get in the way. I didn't even think about that. It was just that it's my first time driving a car, and not a regular car, a NASCAR, a car that goes really fast.
Yeah.
It's the first car I drove. So it was crazy. I don't think a lot of people could say that. The first car they drove, NASCAR.
Yeah, no, I think about all of the advancements that are going to happen from a practical perspective by actually proving that. So I just want to go back to the process. Dr. Falchi, take us through the actual nuts and bolts of the science, your hypothesis, and then actually proving out and the time it took and the journey.
Well, there's a bit of history here. We started the program back in 2013. And so really the goal was to get into human-machine interface. That's interfacing a human with machine by way of a computer to help with disabilities, just to help people gain mobility and independence and do things that they weren't able to do. And not necessarily at that point brain-machine interface, but human-machine interface. And so we set up an initial platform with a race car. And we were fortunate that we had a NASCAR Cup racing team here in Colorado, which is unusual. They're usually on the East Coast. And they donated for us an actual NASCAR Cup car that they were all using at the time. And I was also fortunate to have an engineering team donating their time to modify the car so that it could be driven either by a paraplegic individual if they only had use of their arms. So we had hand controls, but if they didn't have use of arms or legs, we wanted to be able to be driven hands-free, feet-free. So they set up the car such that it could accept an electrical signal from anywhere and independently actuate the throttle, the brake, steer right, steer left. So it didn't matter where that signal was coming from, but it was designed that way. So we initially set it up where you put on this specialized helmet that allowed the car to detect head movement to steer right, left, and German was doing that in this initial part. And then we had a little straw that you sip or puff into. You puff into it, it can detect the pressure change and actuate the throttle. And if you sip back into it, it can actuate the brake.
I wanted to say congratulations in a major way, because taking something abstract, you have a theory, and I'm a big fan of, a lot of people, I always say, kind of sit in a cave and philosophize and ideas. But I want to say thank you and congratulations to wanting to push that through to a practical application and seeing that through. That is in today's world, that is very, very tough. So that's really, really special.
Well, I appreciate it. And it's really a collaboration of so many people. I got lucky in many ways. We have a local racetrack that that houses our car, gives us a pit crew. Maintaining an actual NASCAR Cup race car is not an easy thing. And so I have so many people donating their time. The engineers do that as well. And then we have many wonderful people like German that are willing to get into the car and test it out. But then the experience for me is always wonderful because it's the motivation I see in these folks doing something they thought they'd never really be able to do, and then they do it. It's quite a inspirational thing.
What would you say was the most challenging part of the process?
It was many things. One, getting people to buy into the idea, first of all, of even starting a program like this. What, you're really going to use a race car? And then getting them to donate the race car, and then getting them to maintain the race car, and then to get NASCAR folks involved in enjoying all this. But the challenging part was then really the engineering. And so I got to give credit to the engineers. I mean, they're the folks that were really doing all the magic. On my end, it's a PhD electrical engineering team. Harry Doreen's our lead engineer, and just donating their time. They do all the magic. I tell them, this is what I would like it to do, but they're the ones actually doing it. So they had to figure out, okay, how do I get somebody driving a car hands-free, feet-free? And we know we want them in a fire suit, racing helmet, and all that for safety. Well, we know they can move their head. So it was really a gyroscope on the helmet and cameras around the car detecting head movement and translating that into steer right, steer left, and then independently throttle brake. Well, you could use just your mouth for that as well. So it was really us talking together what kind of things can these folks do, and how can an engineer translate this into the real world. That's how we started it.
So if you're just joining us, we're sitting down with Dr. Scott Falchi and German Aldana talking about the technology that allowed German to drive a car with his mind. But a reminder, as mentioned earlier, we'll be giving away another common denominator gift basket to a lucky listener that includes merch, mugs, and much more. To be entered to win, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at mpopak and DM me that password on any of the platforms. Today's password is NASCAR. So good luck, and we'll be doing the draw later this week. Now back to the show. I want to just go back to the actual ride, German. Walk us through that actual process. Was that, how difficult was that for you to actually control the car with your mind?
Well, it was pretty, it was a little difficult, not too much, because at home I've been practicing like a little bit, so I kind of knew how it was. But once I was in the car, I had to try to be as focused as I can, and just go over what we did, like think about closing, and so the car can accelerate, think about relaxing to keep a certain speed, to brake. So the first 2 laps, I went slow. I had to get the hang of it. But after the first 2 laps, the next day, I went faster and faster as I saw how much control I was gaining. Then by the 3rd day, I was full control, felt confident. I wasn't worried about nothing.
And what was the maximum speed you were able to go to?
The car doesn't have a speed, so I don't know.
Right. I mean, I can jump in there for you. There is no speedometer on a race car, so we don't know. On this track, a professional driver, it was only a mile track, so a professional driver, an actual professional driver is not going to take it much faster than 160 something on a track. And German, we did this remotely for a year. He was just on a computer. He'd never been in any car really driving, let alone this car. So when we first just put him in the car and said, okay, and rev this thing up, 850 horsepower with a safety driver, of course, that's a little intimidating to anybody. And then, of course, he's going to do this hands-free, feet-free, and the accelerator, the throttle, entirely with his mind. German had tons of questions. I get it. Like, am I going to put this in the wall? What if it doesn't really work? Wow. So it was... German was incredible. I mean, he just had to we just said, just inch it out there. Just slowly, get control. And what he did, because we watched him, every lap, he got faster and faster, because you got to learn how to take the turns, because it's steep at the turns. It's, on the straightaways, you're flat and then you're elevated. So he's got to learn how to handle the car on the turns. And then when he would come to the straightaway, each time he'd get faster. He had a plan because when he hit to the straightaways, he was getting faster and faster and faster each lap. It's hard to know what speeds he actually got up to, but I'm sure it was over 60 miles an hour from doing nothing. Did he actually hit 100 or above? He would have gotten there. For sure, if we gave him a few more laps, because every lap was getting faster.
How many total laps was it?
Do you remember, German? I mean, I think you probably got close to 20 laps.
Yeah, probably around there. Yeah, I think so.
I think through the journey, I think the idea is, where do you go from here? In other words, now that you've broken the box, I like to say, right? Now that you've proven the concept, what is your what are your thoughts on what's kind of possible as a
Exactly. So we didn't. Yes, we want to keep the fun going. People to experience this around the country and so forth. But what can we do with this practically? And so the goal was, all right. So if you can develop this human machine interface such that you can do all the complicated things of driving a car, a race car, real time, real world, having to make quick decisions, throttle, brake, steer right, steer left, can we apply this to the real world? And the answer is yes. So what things are we hoping for? Well, one, something simple, driving an electrical wheelchair, right? Just driving a wheelchair or a golf cart. We're not expecting German to become a NASCAR Cup driver or, even drive on the highway in a car. Although we are working on adaptive racing leagues, and I haven't told German about that yet. But we'll get there. But it can also be applied to, for instance, a robotic arm, actuating a robotic arm, or exoskeleton devices on the body. Like German actually does have one type of device that he uses on his hands that the folks at the Miami project have developed, that German is a participant in. But it can be other parts of the body as well. It can be control systems in a home.
And I know it's a passion of yours, Dr. Falchi, is the not-for-profit you have, Falchi Adaptive Motorsports. Tell us about the organization.
Well, it's just really a bunch of wonderful people just volunteering their time. That's the organization we started back in 2013, literally for what we're talking about today. So it was to bring adaptive motorsports as a new adaptive sport, but as importantly, to develop this human-machine interface science and engineering that hopefully we would be able to apply in the real world. So maintaining a NASCAR Cup car race car does have expenses. And so we've been very fortunate that we have Pikes Peak International Raceway out here in Colorado, housing our car and maintaining our car. You got to have new tires, fuel, and you've always got to have wrenches out there fixing the car. Something always wants to happen to a NASCAR Cup car. It just does. And then we have an engineering team that's just been wonderful to us, donating their time. So that's the nuts and bolts of the organization. When we take this around the country, we don't charge anybody anything. So everybody that participates in the events does it for free. They just have to get there. And so really, we just attempt to raise funds really just for getting the car to places, maintaining it, and having these folks have a wonderful time. And hopefully while we do this, we're going to get some of this science and technology mainstream. We've already done this to some extent. We've already, our engineers have already applied this to an electric wheelchair, that it's all controlled by head movement. So German right now is controlling the throttle with thought. He thinks about squeezing his hand. That thought can be captured. The electrical fingerprint of that thought is captured and translated into the throttle. But we want to capture other thoughts so that he can actuate everything: throttle, brake, steer right, steer left. And I know once we do that, he'll be able to drive the wheelchair just with thoughts.
And I'm not sure if you're familiar. I was just looking at the pros and cons, again, as a layperson, of Elon Musk's company Neuralink. Any overlap work there, or any thoughts on his company?
Yes, in fact, I've spoken to the Miami folks. We have too. We're attempting to contact him. I mean, he's a car guy, and his program is a little more invasive. I mean, so you can capture thought just at the scalp, EEG. We do this for so there are electrical changes that occur on the brain, changes in electrical potential that you can pick up at the scalp. You can pick it up at the surface of the brain. That's what German's device is. Neuralink actually penetrates the brain a little bit. And they're developing devices there that may even allow more ability to do things. So we're contacting him, and we'll see where that goes.
And I know German, I know you're studying technology and computer science at Miami-Dade College. Do you hope to be an inspiration for other differently abled people? What's your what's your horizon look like?
Yeah, so studying. So my goal is for people with disabilities, not only spinal cord, other disabilities that have people on chairs, to continue to study, to work, get out there, don't think life is over, give up. Also, there's a lot of help out there, like from places like the Miami Project, University of Miami, Dr. Falchi, many more programs that are out here that are scientists and researchers trying to find a cure for paralysis. So us as people with disabilities, we have to go out there and participate, help out science and technology so that the cure could get closer and closer and people could walk again. My goal is to keep pushing it, not only for me, but for other people in the future, whenever they have an accident, suffer a spinal cord, to have medical equipment that'll help them recover faster. I don't know, any other new type of technology. So, the goal is to graduate and work on this too with all the doctors and scientists.
I think it's really an inspiration. Anybody comes on the show or people we meet that are pushing the envelope of what's possible and giving hope to people. So I want to wish you, German, the best of luck. And Dr. Falchi, thank you guys both so much for joining us on the show. Dr. Falchi, how can people find out more about the work that you're doing?
They can contact us at Falchi Adaptive Motorsports or Falchi Institute for Spinal Cord Injuries.
Well, thank you so much. It's really gives hope in areas where we need it. So thank you. Thank you guys so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Common Denominator podcast. Join us next week for another inspiring, impactful, and empowering conversation. To learn more about Moshe, head to moshepopak.com. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it. And we'd be grateful if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the show.